Getting to the heart of the matter. Back to Guy, Ben, and Frank with more Inside the News.
Welcome back to our third segment of Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. We're going to continue on with just a little bit of what we were talking about, and then we're going to get into the importance of the space and defense and the Space Force and all. Ben, but I want to go back because you mentioned something, because you said China is the issue, then you went China is the issue, and China is the issue. And I want to go back to what we were talking about, that they have invested so much money into trying to buy off politicians in Washington. We now found out that Swalwell from California, he's been compromised by some China people. Ben, go.
Politicians, leading scientists, heads of universities, the extent of Chinese penetration into the United States is really significant. There are thousands, tens of thousands of Chinese graduate students studying in the US.
Yep.
They are all working for the central government. They don't have a choice. There are probably lots of them who are dreaming of becoming US citizens, who would love to immigrate to the United States, but the Chinese government is very good at coercing any expat who's in the United States or elsewhere to spy on behalf of the Chinese government. So you have PhD students all over the place working on at schools like Caltech and Stanford and MIT and Harvard, and they're working on their PhD program and spying for the Chinese central government at the same time. They don't have a choice. It's not an option to them. If the Chinese government approaches them and says, hey, we want you to investigate this or get your hands on this thesis or that thesis and get it to us, or secret notes taken, they don't have a choice. They have to comply because their family will be at risk. It's like the North Korean regime. I mean, you just don't have a choice. So this is the reality, and the Chinese have tons of money to spend, and they have sprinkled it out very liberally. We had the Harvard head chemistry professor, the head of the chemistry department, if I get this right, and excuse me, don't quote me on that, but a senior Harvard department head was just convicted of spying on behalf of the Chinese government because he took tons of money from the Chinese and in return revealed secret programs that he was working on, and that Harvard was working on behalf of the US government. So the compromise is really unbelievable. And we're about to put a president in charge who is more compromised than anyone else. It is unbelievable. And the press completely ignored this story, poo-pooed it as if it were made up fabrication. And yet we know for a fact that Hunter Biden and James Biden were getting millions and millions of dollars from the Chinese. They're owned. And we'll have to see how Biden reacts. Maybe he'll repudiate all that and come out hard against the Chinese, but early evidence is quite to the contrary.
You know, Frank, when Ben was talking there and he mentioned Caltech and then he also mentioned Harvard, there are these pockets. We're talking Caltech and Stanford and all this on the West Coast, and on the East Coast here, we've got Harvard, we've got MIT, which are just on the street from each other on Mass Avenue over there, and hotbeds over in that area. And this is where all the concentration of the brain trust seems to be. And the middle of the country, there's a lot of brain trust there, but they know that these are also power centers of media as well, Frank.
They are. Let's look at something else, too. Trump came into office as being the most anti-China president we've had. Who really started really pressing him hard on the impeachment and on the investigations? Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Adam Schiff, Dianne Feinstein. What do all these folks have in common besides being Democrats? They're all from California. Take a look at the folks who contributed to their campaigns in big measure. Organizations like Hollywood, Disney, etc. You have to draw the line that China bought the California Democratic Party and essentially inspired them to impeach Donald Trump, to cripple Donald Trump, because he was going against China. No one wants to say that sort of thing out loud, but it is there. When you look at Swalwell's comments, when you look at his intensity during the whole period of the anti-Trump investigation, then you find out he's sleeping with the Chinese communist spy. You look at Dianne Feinstein in the Senate, find out that she's had someone on her staff for decades who's a Chinese agent. When you look at Adam Schiff, when you look at Nancy Pelosi, all of these California Democrats who take contributions that are essentially pass-throughs of Chinese money into the American political system, you begin to get a perspective of how intense China's influence, particularly on the Democratic Party, has been, and what a role that actually played in the 4-year assault on the Trump administration.
Wow, Ben, I tell you what, so much did he lay that out there. I mean, he's going through all those people in California, and I'm dumbfounded here because I'm going, man, Frank is, I should know Frank is right because he's on our show, but Frank was right.
Well, absolutely. China, there are a lot of Chinese living in California. It's always had a large Asian population, so it is a very comfortable place and geographically close for Chinese who are working in the United States to live, and the penetration of the Democratic Party, which you'd have to say, based on evidence, is a willing accomplice with the Chinese Communist Party at this point. And that's not to say there aren't Republicans who have succumbed to this. The Chinese are not afraid to splash the money around. And unfortunately, that is a very successful way to recruit people to work on your behalf and to compromise them, as the Biden family so adequately shows us. So this is a real issue. And unfortunately, I have no idea what to expect out of the Biden administration, but I'm not optimistic.
All right, Space Force here, Frank. We have about a minute left. Go.
Well, the first direct recruits into the United States Space Force have been inducted. The Space Force, begun by Donald Trump, is now a real part of the American military scene. And considering that the United States, more than any other nation on Earth, is thoroughly dependent on space for command and control throughout our defense system, this is absolutely essential. We've seen now both China and Russia knock satellites out of orbit. Russia has been the most recent. They've experimented successfully with a direct ascent satellite killer missile, which means that we are in danger of becoming deaf, dumb, and blind in the event of any conflict between China, Russia, or the United States. It's a story that's interesting. You find only in a couple of specialized journals. You don't really find too much information on it elsewhere, but it's a real and immediate threat.
All right. We've got to take a pause here. That was Frank Vernuccio. He's with American Analysis and News and Media. You can find him at usagovpolicy.com. And Ben Brunson, the author of the Falstaff, Enigma, and Esther, Sling. You can find Ben at amazon.com and benbrunson.com. We have to take a time out. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.